Coming up on Arirang News. The Israeli military says it launched its biggest incursion since the Hamas attack on October 7th with an overnight raid in Gaza. This, it adds, is in preparation for the next stages of combat. South Korea, the US, and Japan jointly denounce what they say is North Korea's supply of arms and military equipment to Russia, raising concerns about the possibility of Moscow's nuclear technology being transferred to Pyongyang. The South Korean economy in the July to September period recorded on-quarter growth for the third consecutive time, up 0.6%. But it is uncertain whether the country will be able to achieve its target of 1.4% growth this year. Good evening. It's 9 p.m. here in Seoul. Thank you for joining us on Arirang News. We start with what the Israeli military says is its biggest incursion since Hamas' attack on Israel on October 7th. Overnight, the Israeli army conducted a relatively large ground raid inside Gaza, targeting Hamas positions, calling it a preparation for a ground invasion. Lee Si-hoo leads us off. In an indication of an escalation in the Gaza Strip, Israeli military forces said they carried out a, quote, relatively large operation in the enclave overnight on Thursday. Israel's army radio described it as the biggest incursion of the current war. The military said the targeted raid was carried out in preparation for the next stages of combat. The strike follows Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's comment on Wednesday that Israel was readying for a ground invasion.
Simultaneously, we are preparing for a ground invasion. I will not elaborate on when, how, or how many. I will also not elaborate on the various calculations we are making.
According to reports by the Wall Street Journal, Israel has agreed to a U.S. request to delay its expected ground invasion so that Washington could place air defenses in the region to protect U.S. troops as early as later this week. It also reported the U.S. is trying to get out as many of the 200-plus hostages taken by Hamas during its October 7 attack as possible before the invasion. U.S. President Joe Biden denied making such requests.
No. What I have indicated to him is that if that's possible to get these folks out safely, that's what he should do. It's their decision. But I did not demand it. I pointed out to him, if it's real, it should be done.
Meanwhile, on Thursday morning, fires and smoke plumes were seen rising in the border area between Israel and Lebanon. The source of the fires has not yet been verified. Israel has carried out intense strikes on Gaza after the Hamas attack on Israeli communities earlier this month that killed some 1,400 people. According to Gaza's health ministry, more than 6,500 Palestinians have been killed in the attacks as of Wednesday. Lee Si-hoo, Arirang News. The top diplomats of Seoul, Washington, and Tokyo jointly denounced North Korea's alleged supply of arms and military equipment to Russia. They also raised concerns about the possibility of Moscow's nuclear technology being transferred to Pyongyang. Choi Min-jung reports.
South Korea, the United States, and Japan's top diplomats have issued a joint statement condemning North Korea and Russia's arms transfers. In the statement released Thursday, Seoul's Foreign Minister Park Jin, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken, and Japanese Foreign Minister Yoko Kamikawa strongly denounced Pyongyang's provision of military equipment and munitions to Moscow for use against Ukraine.
Despite repeated warnings from the international community, Russia and North Korea have continued to pursue military cooperation, including arms transfers. The joint statement was adopted to show that South Korea, the US, and Japan take this issue seriously.
The statement underlined that several deliveries of weapons from North Korea to Russia have been completed.
The US disclosed through a White House briefing in mid-October that a container departing from North Korea was moved to a Russian ammunition warehouse near a Ukrainian battlefield. The issue has been continuously tracked through cooperation between Seoul and Washington.
The statement also underlined how Pyongyang is seeking assistance to advance its military capabilities in return for its support to Russia. This includes the potential for any transfer of nuclear or ballistic missile-related technology to the regime. Officials emphasized that arms transfers and technical cooperation related to the North's weapons of mass destruction, ballistic missiles, or conventional weapons programs would violate multiple UN Security Council resolutions, which contain restrictions that Russia itself voted for. The three countries urged Pyongyang and Moscow to abide by UNSC resolutions and immediately cease all activities that violate them. Last month's summit between Kim Jong-un and Vladimir Putin reinforced global concerns about a potential bilateral arms deal. Choi Min-jung, Arirang News.
President Yoon is now back in Seoul after his trip to Saudi Arabia and Qatar, becoming the first Korean leader to make official state visits to the two Gulf states. The 6-day trip not only included massive deals and investment pledges for infrastructure, automobiles, and smart farms, but also elevated the ties to a new level. Here's our Kim Do-yeon for a wrap-up of the visits.
President Yoon landed at Seoul Air Base on Thursday morning after his two-state visits to Saudi Arabia and Qatar. It is the first time that a South Korean president has visited either country for a state visit. The numbers show the weight of the 6-day trip. In Riyadh, 51 deals and memorandums of understanding worth $15.6 billion were signed. And in Qatar, around a dozen deals and MOUs were signed, adding up to $4.6 billion. The top office, tying this with the state visit to UAE earlier this year, dubbed this new era of cooperation as the Middle East 2.0.
With this trip, a playing field of more than $70 billion has been made in the Middle East since Yoon's inauguration. To expand the market for the people and companies of South Korea for a more abundant future to come more quickly is the reason why President Yoon went to the region of hot deserts.
As previously reported, some specific notable deals include the contract between the state-run Korean National Oil Corps and Saudi Arabia's state-run oil giant Saudi Aramco to create a joint crude oil reserve of 5.3 million barrels in the South Korean city of Ulsan. In Qatar, a $3.9 billion contract was made between South Korea's Hyundai Heavy Industries and Qatar's state-owned petroleum company Qatar Energy for the construction of 17 LNG carriers. And other deals expanded into new sectors not normally associated with the Middle East. In fact, the majority of the deals came from new industries such as smart farms, AI, and electric vehicle production, as both Saudi Arabia and Qatar prepare for the post-oil economy with Saudi Vision 2030 and Qatar National Vision 2030.
South Korea and Middle Eastern countries building ships and EVs together and drawing a map of new industries was hard to imagine in the past. These are big changes, and we rate this as a remarkable outcome.
Another highlight of the trip was when President Yoon arrived at Future Investment Initiative, personally driven to the event by Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. The surprise move included the Crown Prince telling President Yoon that next time they get in a car together, he hopes it is a Hyundai EV produced in Saudi Arabia, referring to the new Hyundai Kia EV plant to be made after a deal during Yoon's trip. Meanwhile, on the trip with President were 139 business leaders from South Korea as President Yoon attended business forum in both countries. Also, as he does on overseas trips, Yoon took the time to meet college students, emphasizing bilateral people-to-people exchanges and motivating the young generation to contribute to global prosperity. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
The South Korean economy in the July to September period recorded on-quarter growth for the third consecutive time of 0.6%. But it is uncertain whether the country will be able to achieve its target of 1.4% growth this year. Our correspondent Lee Soo-jin explains.
South Korea's economy recorded a slight growth during the July to September period.
Data from the Bank of Korea released on Thursday shows that the country's gross domestic product, a key indicator of economic growth, rose 0.6% on quarter during the third quarter of this year. This is the third consecutive quarter that the country has seen economic growth and the second straight quarter that the nation has seen an on-quarter economic growth of 0.6%. The central bank said the growth was mainly led by the increase in net exports as well as private spending, the two main drivers of South Korea's GDP. Net exports rose in the third quarter as total exports rose more sharply compared to total imports. Exports rose by 3.5% from the previous quarter thanks to recovery in shipments of semiconductors as well as machinery and equipment. Imports were up by 2.6% on the back of increased imports of petroleum products. Private spending rose by 0.3%, mostly driven by increased spending on food and accommodation. Government spending also increased by 0.1% as spending on social security benefits went up. Investment in construction grew by 2.2% on increased orders, but investment in facilities dropped by 2.7% due to sluggish demand for machinery. Despite the rise in both net exports and private spending, it remains uncertain whether the nation can reach the BOK's economic growth outlook due to global uncertainties.
There are growing uncertainties regarding how the recent geopolitical risks arising from the Israel Hamas conflict and the continued interest rate hikes in the United States will impact our country.
But the officials said that although the central bank previously said that South Korea's economy will have to grow around 0.7% in both the third and the fourth quarter to meet this year's outlook, this was simply a rough estimate and that it's still possible for the nation's economy to grow 1.4%. 이수진, Arirang News.
Korea's business sentiment index for October lost ground on month, with both manufacturing and non-manufacturing firms showing negative outlooks. According to the Bank of Korea, on this Thursday, the index stands at 70 this month, which is the lowest since February, despite a rebound in September amid a tangible retreat in consumer spending. The index measures business sentiment about market prospects, with the reading below 100, meaning pessimists outnumber optimists. The estimated earnings of South Korean auto giant Hyundai Motor Company for the July to September period this year have beat market expectations, recording an all-time high for the third quarter. The company announced on Thursday that its operating profit during the period is forecast to stand at 3.82 trillion won, or around $2.8 billion, soaring more than 146% on year. Also, Hyundai's operating profit from January to September this year nearly doubled compared to that of last year. Hyundai attributed the earnings surprise to an increase in sales of high-margin sport utility vehicles within the country, as well as solid overseas sales, particularly in North America, Europe, and India. SK Hynix saw sales surging by 24% on quarter during the July to September period this year. Company officials on this Thursday linked the findings to strong sales of high-bandwidth memory semiconductor amid the growing AI industry. Sales of DRAM chips were also reportedly in the black for the first time this year, as the average selling price gained 10%. Despite the surge in sales, the company logged an operating loss of some $1.3 billion in the third quarter. Now, it's been almost 3 weeks since the Hamas attack on Israel sparked concern over rising economic uncertainty, especially in terms of volatility in energy prices and rising inflationary pressure. Our business correspondent Shin Ha-young explains the economic impact of scenarios that could play out in the Middle East.
Since the beginning of the Israel-Hamas conflict, all eyes have been on global oil prices, which can push up inflation both at home and abroad. Global oil prices jumped more than 4% on the third day of the Israel-Hamas conflict, which was the biggest one-day gain since April 3rd. However, even though oil prices rebounded as of Wednesday after prices fell on Tuesday for the third straight session, fluctuations have been less significant for the past few days. This came amid diplomatic efforts from a number of countries to release hostages. Also, Israel has not yet launched a ground invasion due to international pressure, alleviating concerns about disruptions in oil supply. But it's too early to predict the actual economic impact, as it's uncertain how the conflict will unfold. Bloomberg Economics estimates that if the conflict extends to a war between Israel and Iran, it could push oil prices to $150 a barrel and drop global growth to 1.7%. This is because of Iran's proximity to the Strait of Hormuz, a vital oil trading route.
If Iran disrupts oil tankers passing through the Strait of Hormuz or even blocks the strait, it could significantly impact global oil prices. This is because about 30% of the volume of the world's total oil consumption passes through that route.
Meanwhile, unlike the Ukraine war, in the case of the Israel-Palestine conflict, the region's contribution to global raw material production is not substantial. According to a report from the Korea International Trade Association, Israel and Palestine each account for less than 0.4% of South Korea's overall trade, meaning the effect is expected to be insignificant. However, the author of the report said it's necessary to diversify the supply chain of certain items.
South Korea heavily depends on Israel for key items, including bromine and airborne radar for aircraft. With an import dependency exceeding 90% for these items, a prolonged Israel-Hamas conflict could pose challenges for South Korea. Therefore, it is crucial to diversify the supply chain to secure alternative suppliers.
He added that a prolonged war could potentially disrupt the supply chains in these advanced industries, as Israel is a hub for this sector, where there are R&D centers and sales offices of South Korean firms like Samsung and SK Hynix. 신나영, 아리랑 뉴스.
Authorities here in South Korea are tightening the vaccination campaign as the lumpy skin disease affecting cattle spread nationwide, with the number of confirmed cattle farms with outbreaks rising to at least 42 in just a week. Our Yoon went to one of the farms to check out on-site disease prevention efforts.
Viral lumpy skin disease is spreading in South Korea, with the number of farms found to have confirmed cases on the rise. The outbreak was first discovered in Chungcheongnam-do province on October 20th, and since then more at other farms in the province, as well as in neighboring Chungcheongbuk-do province, Gyeonggi-do, Jeollabuk-do, and Gangwon-do provinces, and Incheon. This has led to the culling of over 2,000 cattle. As part of the response, authorities have announced the introduction of an additional 4 million doses of the vaccine by the end of this month, and that all cattle in the country will be vaccinated by early November. The Central Disaster Management Headquarters is currently carrying out vaccinations, focusing on farms close to where outbreaks occurred, using the 540,000 doses of pre-secured vaccine. This farm in Gyeonggi-do province is vaccinating all 104 cattle in its herd.
The vaccination of all cattle on the farm has been completed according to the government's manual, and we are keeping strict vehicle control measures to prevent the spread of the disease. Also, I'm trying my best to control parasites, since the virus is transmitted by blood-sucking insects. When feeding the animals in the morning and evening, I am spending more time observing the cattle to check for symptoms.
Local governments are actively promoting disease preventive measures, including the operation of disinfection facilities, as well as pest control measures, as lumpy skin disease is transmitted by blood-feeding insects. The mortality rate is under 10%, and symptoms include skin nodules and lower milk production. While the disease does not pose a threat to humans in any way, farm owners are concerned.
I believe that it is most important for individual farm owners to pay careful attention to prevent the disease from spreading. I am seriously concerned about the lumpy skin disease spreading to my farm and leading to a culling of all the cattle.
The Central Disaster Management Headquarters has placed restrictions on the movement of cattle on farms in regions neighboring areas where lumpy skin disease has been found until vaccination is complete. Authorities say, considering the period required for antibodies to form, the next 3 weeks are crucial. Yoon, Arirang News.
The Tokyo Electric Power Company said on Thursday that it'll begin its third round of radioactive wastewater release from its devastated Fukushima nuclear power plant on November 2nd. Japan's Kyodo News reported that, like the previous rounds, some 7,800 cubic meters of wastewater will be released into the Pacific Ocean for a period lasting around 17 days. That is, if the tritium concentration meets the standards for release. TEPCO began the first round of discharge in August. It plans to release a total of 31,200 cubic meters by March next year. The U.S. House of Representatives elected Republican Mike Johnson as its Speaker on Wednesday, ending 3 weeks of a leadership vacuum that came after the historic ouster of former Speaker Kevin McCarthy. Third-term Congressman Johnson was elected in a 220 to 209 vote following intense internal wrangling over who should grab the gavel. The new speaker is tasked with a host of legislative tasks, including handling President Joe Biden's request for support for Israel and Ukraine, as well as federal spending bills whose passage is needed to prevent a government shutdown next month. Johnson is vocal supporter of former President Donald Trump with little leadership experience and a social conservative who has been against same-sex marriage and abortion. U.S. lawmakers are seeking to designate November 22nd as Kimchi Day. According to the Museum of Korean American Heritage on Wednesday, the House Committee on Oversight and Accountability will submit a resolution to this end in December. The move is being led by Korean American Republican Representative Yoon, with support from more than a dozen lawmakers. The resolution comes as Seoul and Washington celebrate the 70th anniversary of their alliance this year, which also marks the 120th anniversary of the first Korean immigrants to arrive in the U.S. The resolution claims that kimchi has been widely acknowledged as a healthy dish with growing popularity in the U.S. as well. Now, here in Seoul, a seasonal tour returns to offer visitors the chance to indulge in a serene evening glimpse of Korea's first Western-style imperial palace. Our Shin Se-byuk was there.
When the day fades into darkness, Seokjujeon Hall illuminates Seoul's night. Located in Deoksugung Palace in central Seoul, Seokjujeon Hall completed in 1910 as Korea's first Western-style imperial palace. As its literal name, a hall made of stone, suggests, Seokjujeon Hall is constructed entirely out of granite and bricks instead of the traditional wood and mud. On autumn nights, a unique tour of this historic building unfolds. The regular seasonal tour, dubbed Night at Seokjujeon, takes visitors on a journey back in time. Guided by hosts in traditional Joseon Dynasty attire and accompanied by insightful narrators, visitors explore 9 spaces. Stepping into Seokjujeon's central lobby, you're greeted by authentic furnishing and decor. Highlights include the Emperor's bedroom, adorned in regal yellow, and the Emperor's chamber, embellished with delicate plum blossoms. After the indoor exploration, the experience continues on an outdoor terrace exclusively open for night tour visitors. Guests can enjoy tea and desserts beneath the soft glow of the autumn moon. Live classical music sets the mood, making the night a perfect blend of history and culture. The approximately 1-hour tour includes an original musical made specially for this night tour. The performance features historical figures, Emperor Gojong, who built Seokjujeon, and Empress Myeongseong.
I failed to secure a spot the last few times, but I finally made it, and it was worth the wait. The guide was fantastic, and the interior was just stunning. Opening up at night also made it even more special.
From the warm welcome from those wearing traditional clothes to the regional musical, everything was enjoyable. Seokjujeon is a modern residence, but it has a lot of authentic Korean charm. It truly was a meaningful and enriching experience.
Seokjujeon at night tours run until November 2nd, but reservations are currently closed. However, the night tour may return to greet more visitors next year. 신새벽 Arirang News.
Most inland regions will see major drops in morning temperatures tomorrow. For Seoul, lows will plummet to 8 degrees Celsius, which is about the seasonal average. Wide temperature gaps of more than 10 degrees are expected, so make sure to dress in layers. Some lingering showers are in store until the morning hours. The Seoul metropolitan area and Gangwon-do province will see 5 to 40 millimeters. The surrounding regions, including Chungcheong-do province, will see around 5 to 20. Fine dust concentrations will soar after the rain. This will be the first influx of fine dust for this fall season. For central regions in Jeollado province, fine dust levels will stand in the bad category. Tomorrow, Seoul will start up at 8 degrees, Gwangju and Chuncheon at 11. As for the daily highs, Seoul will get up to 19 degrees, Daejeon and Gwangju 18, Busan will be topping out at 21 degrees. Temperatures will hover around the seasonal average for the next few days. That's all for now, and here are the weather conditions around the world. That brings an end to tonight's newscast. Thank you for joining us. We'll be back tomorrow with the latest news. Good night.